Saturday mornings is for cleaning. And so you could just hear Mexican music playing in the background as you're waking up, and my mom telling me to wake up. And so we would clean, and then right after we would go to the grocery store nearby called Fiesta. And we didn't have access to cars. So we would walk to Fiesta, and we would always have to go under the highway. And there was this house that was underneath the highway. But I remember as a kid always asking myself why there was a highway right above her house. It just seemed very odd. On our way back, we would always carry the cart full of food, and we would have to walk on the street because there weren't any sidewalks. I think that was maybe like my first exposure to realizing that income and our differences does eventually impact our quality of life.
Growing up in Detroit in the 80s was the bomb. It was everything, man. Back then we had the swimmobile, skating rinks and parties and hanging out. It was bike races in the middle of the street and, freeze tag and everything. It was lively. Parks and fun and just friends. Detroit is the bomb.
Growing up in Rondo was a community that was safe. It was where my doctor was. It was where our attorneys were. It was where our school teachers were. It was where my church was. There were many businesses in that community. Rondo was a perfect example of Wall Street or Rosewood. Once upon a time, it was a place of e-commerce and culture and home ownership, beautiful lawns, kids playing.
The neighborhood was home. Everybody knew my name. Everyone had the right to tell me not to do something. Hello, Mrs. Powers. Hey, Margaret Ann, how are you doing? They knew me. And that was comfortable. If it was a time for death or sorrow, the neighborhood came together. When there was time for celebration, the neighborhood came together. That was what home was about.
My parents were from Virginia, but they moved to Buffalo because in the 1930s and 40s, there was lots of work available for people. You had General Motors, Chevrolet plant, Ford plant.
Buffalo's full of parks. We got state parks, we got county parks and city parks, and you've got downtown Buffalo. Things are beginning to develop. Not every family has a car, but, cars are the next big thing.
At one time, Akron was a thriving, fastest growing place east of the Mississippi. The rubber industry, influx of African Americans from the South fleeing Jim Crow. In fact, we had a street, Howard Street is still there, the Matthews Hotel. That's where all the jazz folks who came to Akron, and they came to Akron. So when the highway came through, the Inner Belt, which was a planned act of destruction, and they cited this community as blighted, as not worthy of investment, as, suitable to be the collateral damage, to bear the brunt of that. It destroyed a lot. It took away people's sense of safety, their community.
It was a long period of time digging out this trench and ripping right through a community.
Generational wealth was destroyed. Folk that owned their own businesses destroyed.
The interstate highway system, which, the narrative goes, was never intended to run through our cities, but run between our cities, not through our cities. Quite literally, divides and separates it and prevents this human interaction from happening. It's noisy, there's pollution on it, so it repels people too. So it's not just the physical width or space that the interstate takes up. It does the very opposite thing that the origin of a city or the purpose of a city is to do, which is to bring us together, to interact. And so it has that very destructive and negative role that it then plays.
What we need in a community is for people to stay in the neighborhood, to cultivate that community. Because you can grow up in places all around the world and think, oh, nobody from here has ever gone on to be a lawyer. Nobody here from has ever gone on to be a surgeon or an astronaut or a Grammy Award winner. And in fact, in all of those communities, that's inaccurate. They have. And so when we think about reconnecting a community that's been broken, what we're, I think, talking about at the core is redeeming the promise of American prosperity for all of us and all of our communities.
What we are doing is really trying to address and restore the harm that what resulted from redlining and, you know, the freeways and the infrastructure that was built to reinforce that division and that redlining. So you can look at a map of the freeway and see that all the redlined neighborhoods were on one side and, you know, everyone else was on the other. So it should be no surprise that when you overlay redlining maps with life expectancy and health outcomes and education outcomes, you know, they're all vastly different on our side of town than they are in other parts of Dallas. The city of Dallas is really not growing at the same rate as the rest of the region is. And so, you know, all of these highways were built to kind of take people further and further away from the core. And what we're doing is really making a historic investment that should not just grow our neighborhood and really benefit the residents that surround it, but also grow the city overall.
So the Highway to Nowhere is an almost 1.5 mile scar that runs through Old West Baltimore, which is a predominantly African American community. It displaced 1,500 people, destroyed almost 1,000 homes, 62 businesses were destroyed. All of those people are conduits between the city and their constituencies. They get into the nooks and crannies of their communities far better than we can. Their ideas came forth in like a waterfall for what else could be in the Highway to Nowhere besides concrete. They are experts about that area. They know the assets, they know the harms that are being done to them, the noise pollution, the separation, psychological and physical separation that occurs when you have a highway run through a community.
Stockton was the city that had the highest population of Filipinos outside of the Philippines up until the 60s, when there was a freeway built through the entire neighborhoods, demolishing all of the businesses, all of the housing that was there, and housing all of these people, all of these farm workers, these immigrants, and devastated us. Past the freeway, you're in like a wasteland. That's how it's treated. We had to start tackling issues that arose because the freeway was so devastating to our community. And all of our communities of color in that area were having way worse health outcomes. They weren't getting jobs that were going to pay them well. They were always going to have to rely on public assistance. I don't think that Stockton is a bad place. I love where I'm from. Do I think that there are situations that shouldn't be there? Of course I do. Do I think that there's definitely statistics that could reflect a negative narrative? Of course there are. But I love the people that I know. I know who impacted me because I like myself. And so why would I damn a whole city if I came from that city too? There's people just like me there. There's people who are different than me that I love too, that also came from that city. Their home doesn't deserve to be damned. It deserves to be repaired, taken care of.
It's just not brick and mortar and street lights and painted lanes. So how do we approach this differently? How do we do this in a respectful way that honors the legacy and the lives that once occupied this space? The engineers, the builders, the construction guys, they can build a bridge like you've never seen before. We know how to build some roads. But how do you do this and take people's lives and the future? What do you all want to see in this space that really honors that history and that culture that was there, the people who were displaced.
This work for the community, imagining a better future, is vital. Some of our young folks, they don't know this story. They just know that this derelict highway has been there, and they know that they grew up next to a concrete wall. We have to think about what is the environment that we are leaving for them, and what kind of hope can we instill in them that, you know what you have, that's not all there is. There is more, you can access more, and we can work together to create more and better.
Our transportation infrastructure is just so intimately connected to these other aspects of, people's everyday lives. Housing, parks, affordability, so on and so forth. We really need to start to think about transportation in I think, a much more interconnected way than we have in the past.
The Federal Highway Administration gave the green light for the billion-dollar tunnel project today.
It's an inch or a mile. You just keep moving in this process, and then it gives hope to other people. We want to bring economic improvements for everyone, but especially for the African American community that has been deprived of so many.
Took years, but I was worried about this happening in our lifetime. But I'm really excited to see, what's about to happen.
Without dreaming, you can't get anywhere. There's a picture of this beautiful intersection. You can't see the highway under it. You just see this lovely neighborhood. And so that's my dream. That's what I hold on to. That's what I want to see. But to have that dream that something else can happen, I don't know what that is with an interstate. Do we cover them all?
I think something that young people experience is people doubting us because we're young. I think that only encourages us to do it even more because that's just our mentality. If they tell us we can't do it, then we'll just prove them wrong.
Communities are about people. And when you're thinking about people, it's very different than when you're thinking about buildings and placement of structures. How do you value that versus having a fast road go through the middle?
I'm very excited about the possibility of having some second plan for our freeway. We've talked about putting the freeway underground, now we have all of our horizons open from here, building a land bridge, putting generated land from this land bridge into a land trust. There's so many possibilities, and that's super exciting. It's so exciting to know that this can work.
Now that we're moving into engineering, it's not done. And when it's constructed, it's not done. But we have to have the community involved to make it work for the community.
We have to decide as a country if it's okay for public policies and resources, infrastructure and investments to improve the lives of low-income people, improve the lives of people who have been left behind. It's just basic common sense that when we build infrastructure, our goal is to improve people's lives, to facilitate people living more easily in our community. That's, to me, what's at stake here.